Colossians 3:22, bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Okay, so we're getting to the last demographic that he's been talking about. We know we've had wives and husbands and children and fathers, and now we're into slaves or bondservants. And remember, this was a different type of institution than when we think of slavery in the pre-Civil War America. This is a type of slavery that was primarily, it was economically motivated, not racially motivated. We would say that the American slavery was reprehensible because it was racially motivated, not necessarily because of the slave-servant relationship. So we're talking specifically, the translation here that helps us understand that is bondservants, because they are bound to their masters usually because they had gotten into debt and they sold their debt to a master, or they got into debt to someone who then they now have the opportunity to work this off. So it's a relationship between a servant and the master where they have entered into it because of debt. So it's economically motivated. So these bondservants are supposed to obey, same thing that we saw before with children. They're to submit. They're to submit in everything those who are their earthly masters. It's interesting, he throws in this idea of earthly masters, or what to translate it literally would be to your masters according to the flesh. And then he uses some really interesting terms here. He says, not by way of eye service, which is just literally, it's like a word, it's only used 2 times in the New Testament, which is it's eyes and service combined together. And the same thing with people pleasers. There's another word, it's only used 2 times. Not as someone who's just trying to, as a people pleaser of eye service. Like, what he means by that is this eye service is not just when your master is looking. You don't just do service when the eyes of your master are upon you. Does that make sense? So it's an actual obedience that in everything, those who are the masters according to the flesh, not by way of eye service of people pleasers, but here we are, with sincerity of heart. And it says, fearing the Lord. And so he's saying, so it's got, you need to obey and listen, and he's contrasting not as people pleasers, but as a God pleaser. See that? You need to obey not as people pleasers, but as God pleasers or God fearers. That's the way it's laid out grammatically. So not as people pleasers, but fearing the Lord with sincerity of heart. All right? And that's huge, because your faithfulness is not just what your earthly masters see. Your faithfulness is considered by what God sees. And God sees everything, including our hearts, including this, whether or not we have sincerity of heart.